Hey, what is up guys? How are we doing? And welcome back to a very special video today. We've partnered with Be Quiet and Roger from Maxed Out to bring you a video that's going to show you exactly how we build our own PCs. We're going to overclock them to get the most performance out of them. But most importantly, we're going to be giving 2 computers away. So stay tuned to the end of the video to find out how. So let me walk you through some of the parts we're actually using here. This will be an AMD rig. So we have a Ryzen 5 2600X processor. It's 6 cores, it's going to be great for gaming and of course the more productivity workloady stuff. We're using an ROG motherboard. It is the ROG Strix X470-F. Got some RGB there, so don't worry fans. This is going to be bright and vivid. We're also going with ROG for the graphics card. This is a RX 570. It's not the most powerful graphics card out there, but it's going to be fantastic for mainstream games if you're playing at 1080p. Stuff like that is going to do the job excellently. Because we are going to overclock the processor, we need some great cooling to be able to do it. This is the Darkrock Pro 4. It's pretty much the best air cooler I think you can buy right now. It's absolutely huge, and it's going to give us great temperatures, but also low noise. We're also using Silent Wings 3 fans. We're changing out all of the fans on the case. Again, these are excellent at keeping our build nice and quiet when we're doing anything on our computer that's not gaming. It really annoys me when we have loud fans in the background. So we're going to get these tuned and they're going to be really silent, but also having great performance. The memory we're using is from G.Skill. It's the Ripjaws 5. It is a 16GB kit and it's running at 3200 megahertz, which is going to be fantastic for getting the most performance possible out of that Ryzen processor. But we're also using a super fast SSD. This is the Samsung 970 EVO. I know you guys are always going on about this in the comment section because it is ridiculously fast. And then of course the final piece of the puzzle is this. It is the Pure Power 11. This is a power supply that is going to be again very quiet. You're guessing the theme here. We're going for a silent PC, but also one that has the most performance we can get out of it. So it's going to be really interesting to see what we can actually do. Let's jump into it. So the first thing I will always do when starting a build is actually to build the motherboard up, and I do it on the box. And there's 2 reasons for this. One, it's just easier because you're not having to sort of scrape around stuff to actually get it to work. But then also you've got more lights, which when you're building in a dark case especially can get really difficult. So the motherboard itself comes in a anti-static bag. Make sure you don't actually put that on the bag. So you just want to get this out and lay it nice and flat. So if you've never actually seen a motherboard before, it's pretty straightforward really. I would imagine, especially with this instruction manual, you should be able to work it out quite easily. Just in case, this is where our CPU goes on this Ryzen motherboard. Our RAM or memory goes up here. We want to put the RAM slightly offset to the CPU, so it's these 2 DIMMs here. And also, because we're using an M.2 SSD, you might be tempted to put it in this visible one down here, but on this particular motherboard, we need to take the heatsink off so we can actually install that here. Plop that in, bam, RAM, nice and simple. Now for the processor, this one actually comes with a cooler, and we don't need that, so get rid of that. And our CPU comes in here. Because we're using an AMD CPU, it is slightly more delicate than an Intel chip. Line up our arrow with the motherboard, and then just drop that in. Nice and easily, no force required whatsoever. And then you just lower down that catch. CPU is done. Something that actually always seems to come up when you're dealing with M.2 SSDs is that you'll find your normal sized Phillips head screwdriver actually is too fat. So top tip, before you get started, if you are working with M.2 SSDs, get yourself something a bit smaller. So when you do have the appropriate size screwdriver, it should just screw it off. This is quite a long screw, if you're wondering why this is taking quite so long. Boom, there you go. So our SSD is going to sit in here, and because we've got that heatsink on the top, as long as we've actually got good airflow on the case, the heat from the SSD will go into the heatsink and then be blown out through the case. Boom, there you go, that sits flat, and then we can just screw that in with the same screwdriver we used a second ago. Sometimes there's a little protective sleeve, and we need to remove that first. That's a good thing I checked actually, because I did not know that was there for sure. So the cooler itself is actually pretty clever the way they've done it, because one of the complaints with the older coolers was that they were quite complicated and fiddly to actually install. Now, as long as you've got the middle fan actually taken out, all you need to do is remove the top caps on the top piece, and then the screwdriver that you get in the box actually cleverly goes through. It's actually very straightforward. Obviously you need to make sure, because it's quite big, that your RAM isn't going to interfere. But all you need to do is slot that in place, Don't want to apply too much pressure in one go, but I have to admit, for something as big as that, that is pretty seamless. The case we're actually building in here is Be Quiet's Dark Base 700. Now I've worked in quite a few Be Quiet cases before, and the thing you always notice is that they're very clean. They've tidied this one up. We've got a nice amount of basement at the bottom, so it's all tucked out of the way, and then around the back there's plenty of areas to manage your cables. But the thing I like is just how it's nice and open and it's quite clean inside. This is an absolutely huge cooler, yet it doesn't really stick out. Hopefully when we put the graphics card in that will remain the same, but it's looking pretty good so far. In terms of cooling, we've not gone too overboard. We did have quite a lot of fans available to us here, but we've already got 2 on the CPU cooler itself. They're all the Silent Wings fans, so I'm not too concerned about noise. I just want to make sure that we're not overloading the motherboard, and we're going to have a spare header for everything we're using. If you do not have a flashlight with you, you are in for a bad time. We're actually almost there now. It's just time to get this, oh that was shocking, wasn't it? It's just time to get this graphics card installed, and then I think that is pretty much everything done that I need to. Because we're using a M.2 SSD, there's very little that needed to be managed inside. It's just a case of slotting this in, making that very satisfying noise. We can get that lined up. Boom. This is the final piece of the puzzle. It's now just a case of making sure it works and then doing the finishing touches and tidying it up. As you can see, it needs a little bit more TLC, but I'm pretty happy with that. I think the design is pretty jet black, which is nice and neutral. As soon as we get those RGBs on there, it will really complete it. We probably could do with an RGB strip, but we don't have one to hand. All of this stuff we can sort out a bit later. Moment of truth time, everyone's favorite bit. It is definitely plugged in at the back. We've got our monitor hooked up. We've got motion. Ryzen PCs typically take around about 10-20 seconds to get a display on screen. So let's make sure it's actually set on the right input. I mean, I can do PCs, but not monitors. Oh, it's on the front, sorry. There we go, that's promising.
We've got green.
Oh, we've got...
We've got the screen. The screen took about a couple of minutes.
We've got a green light. Are we clicking on it?
Oh, nice.
That's it. So we know the build works, which means it's time to get it set up for gaming, I guess. We will be doing some tweaks, but of course first we need to install Windows. You just need to grab a USB drive and install a Windows ISO onto it. It's really simple. You just go onto the Windows website, you just Google Windows ISO, put it on a stick. It should take around about 20 minutes or so, and then you just need to plug it into your computer, turn it on, and it should actually now automatically come up on screen with the Windows logo. And as long as everything in our computer is detected, things like drives, maximum amount of RAM, or all that good stuff, we should be ready to get started. So yeah, it's come up now. It's just a case of going through, hit next, install. You don't need a product code. You obviously will eventually if you want to activate Windows, but for the time being, I would advise just clicking on I don't have a product key, buying it later just so you can get set up and running. And so before we actually overclock the system, something I always quite like to do is install the motherboard software that controls things like the fan speed. So because we've got an Asus one here, we're using AI Suite. As for the actual overclocking process, it's pretty straightforward. We just need to restart the PC, and once our monitor goes off, we will hit the delete key on the keyboard, and then it will come up with a BIOS. So you're actually wanting to look at the keyboard. When that lights up, that's when you want to hit delete. But in the meantime, the sort of cheats method that I use to overclock very quickly is just to Google the name of the processor and then suffix it with overclock settings. That's a nice green screen. I've seen that one before. That's a very interesting bug. I think that's just these drivers though. They're like beta drivers. That's cool. Have you seen that before? That's very bizarre. The BIOS is actually quite a friendly place these days. It used to look pretty naff and horrible, but it's pretty straightforward. The Asus My Favorites page here shows everything really you would need, but I never use that. I tend to just go straight to the AI tweaker, which is what we use for overclocking the CPU and memory. We've got all of our key settings here. At the top we have memory, which I have overclocked, but it's actually an Intel XMP enabled stick, and with the Asus motherboards you can select this setting called DOCP, which translates those XMP timings and voltages into something that the Ryzen board can actually use and work. As we go down, I have changed the CPU core ratio to 42, which is 4.2 gigahertz. And if we want to put in our voltage settings, we will put them down here. They're currently on automatic, but once you've Googled the settings that you want to use, you can play about with it. And you're basically trying to get the lowest possible voltage on your CPU core that is stable, because if you give it too much voltage, it can decrease the life of your chip. But if you don't give it enough, it won't be stable, and then your computer will be crashing all the time, which isn't the end of the world for games. It's pretty annoying. But if you're wanting to actually do some serious work, well, that's not quite so fun. The main thing I would say that should be changed about this rig or added in is that it would be nice to have some RGB lighting inside the case. So if you do want to win this rig, I would advise that you get some RGB strips. And if you do want to enter to win this PC, it is Europe only, I'm afraid, just because this is physical, it's here, and shipping it abroad, the import fees can get absolutely ridiculous. That is beyond my control. But yeah, Be Quiet have been really kind enough to get all of these parts and offer them to you guys. All we need to do if you want to enter is to leave a comment down below, leave a comment on PC Centric's Instagram and Twitter, and you can be the proud owner of this. One of you guys will win this computer. But there is also another chance to win a computer. But Roger, who will join us now, the idea of this video was to be a head-to-head sort of overclocking build competition, wasn't it? We've got a very large desk, 2 identical systems. It didn't quite really go to plan, did it? What happened?
Everything went wrong, basically.
And that's not an understatement.
No. So if you want to see part 2, then come over to my channel where obviously I troubleshoot that computer.
Because it's not currently working, is it?
No, it's not.
So do go over to Roger's channel. It's maxed out, I believe.
Yeah.
Is that with 2 X's?
No, it's MXDOUT.
There you go. We'll leave that linked all down below, along with my Amazon affiliate links for all of the products that were featured in this build. But a massive thank you to Be Quiet for actually sponsoring this and making this happen. It's not turned out quite how we expected, but I think it's some good videos regardless.
Yeah.
Thank you to Asus for sponsoring the channel as always. Hit the like button, I guess, if you've liked it. It really helps out, so please do that. Subscribe. If you do want to see more builds, you can find them in the top right-hand corner or the end screen. But I don't know, what do you guys think about this build, the case? What would you change about it other than that RGB lighting strip? Let me know down in the comments, but we will see you in the next one. Don't forget to enter the giveaway.